the Treaty of Starlight. The grand pavilion of eternal dawn stretched across the surface of the crystalline moon like a crown of pure light. Thousands of Valkara citizens floated in attendance, their silver bodies glowing softly in the radiance of three suns. Ambassador Lyrian stood at the center of the sacred platform, her ceremonial robes shifting through colors that represented unity and hope. Today marked the end of 3 centuries of war between the Valkara Empire and the human colonies of the Outer Rim. Today, she would marry a human. Commander Marcus Webb stood across from her, dressed in the simple dark uniform of the human diplomatic corps. He looked unremarkable by Valkara standards. No luminous skin, no telepathic presence radiating from his mind, no divine blessing visible in his aura. He was tall for his species, with dark hair touched by gray at the temples and eyes the color of Earth's oceans. When he looked at her, his expression was calm and sincere. The High Oracle began the ceremony, her voice echoing through the minds of every Valkara present. This was how her people communicated during sacred events, through the shared consciousness that connected them all. But when the Oracle's blessing reached toward Marcus, something strange happened. The telepathic wave simply stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall. Marcus smiled politely, completely unaware of the failed connection. Lyrian felt a chill run through her thoughts. She had read reports about this phenomenon, but experiencing it was different. Humans existed in what the Valkyra called the silent dark, a mental void where telepathy could not reach. It was unsettling, like looking at a shadow where light should exist. The ceremony continued. Marcus spoke his vows aloud, his voice clear and steady. He promised peace, cooperation, and understanding between their peoples. His words were simple but carried weight. Lyrian responded with her own vows, transmitted both mentally to her people and spoken aloud for her new husband. When they exchanged the unity crystals, traditional symbols of Valkara marriage, Marcus handled his with surprising gentleness. As the crystals touched, Lyrian expected to feel the usual rush of shared emotion that accompanied Valkara bonding. Instead, she felt nothing from Marcus. The silence from his mind was absolute. It was like standing beside an empty room, knowing someone was inside but unable to sense them at all. The celebration feast took place in the Hall of Infinite Reflection. Valkara nobles mingled with human dignitaries, though both groups remained cautious. Lyrian noticed how the humans moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, neither intimidated by Valkara telepathic superiority, nor attempting to compete with it. They simply existed as themselves, unbothered by what they could not do. Marcus stayed close to Lyrian throughout the evening, introducing her to members of his delegation. There was Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist who spoke with enthusiasm about cultural exchange programs, Captain James Rodriguez, whose easy humor helped break the ice with nervous Valkara officials, and Professor Michael Okonkwo, a historian who shared fascinating stories about human exploration of the galaxy. But it was during a quiet moment on the observation deck that Lyrian first sensed something was wrong. The Watchers had arrived. These ancient beings, older than most civilizations, rarely appeared in physical form. They existed as pure consciousness, observing and occasionally guiding the development of younger species. The Valkara considered them the closest thing to gods in the universe. 3 Watchers materialized above the crystalline moon, their forms made of flowing light and geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. They had come to offer their blessing to the Union, a tradition that confirmed divine approval of important events. Lyrian felt joy surge through the telepathic network of her people. The Watchers' presence meant the peace would hold. But the Watchers did not bless the marriage. They hovered in silence, their attention fixed on Marcus and the other humans present. Lyrian felt confusion ripple through the Valkara consciousness. This had never happened before. The Watchers always blessed unions that promoted peace and unity. Then slowly the Watchers withdrew. They faded from view without a word, without explanation, without the blessing everyone expected. The silence they left behind was deafening. Marcus seemed unaware of what had transpired. He stood beside Lyrian, pointing out constellations visible through the transparent dome above them. He talked about Earth's night sky, about the first time humans had looked up and wondered what lay beyond their world. His voice held a strange quality, not pride or boastfulness, but something else, something that sounded like acceptance mixed with determination. Later that night, after the guests had departed, Larian stood in the quarters she would now share with Marcus. The rooms were designed to accommodate both Valkara and human needs, with sections of zero gravity for her comfort and standard gravity floors for his. Marcus was already there, looking out at the stars through the wide viewport. Larian approached him carefully. She had been trained in diplomacy, in reading body language and verbal cues, since telepathy would not work with humans, but Marcus remained difficult to understand. His posture suggested relaxation, yet there was something watchful in the way he observed the universe beyond the glass. "The Watchers did not bless us," Larian said quietly, speaking aloud as humans required. Marcus turned to her. His expression showed understanding, though she had not explained who the Watchers were or their significance. "I know," he replied simply. "How do you know? You cannot sense them as we do." Marcus smiled, but it was a sad smile. "We have encountered them before. They do not like what they see when they look at us." Larian felt confusion tighten in her chest. "But why? Humans seek peace. You have agreed to this union, to ending the war. You have shown nothing but respect to my people." "It is not about respect or peace," Marcus said softly. He looked back at the stars. "The Watchers are ancient and wise, but they exist in the light. They understand order, structure, and the natural flow of consciousness through the universe. Humans are different." "Different how?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something Larian had not heard before, a depth that suggested experiences far beyond what she could imagine. "Humans come from the silent dark, as your people call it. We evolved in a part of space where the normal rules did not apply, where consciousness existed differently. The Watchers do not understand us because we remind them of something they prefer to forget." "What is that?" Marcus met her eyes, and for a brief moment, Larian thought she saw something vast and incomprehensible reflected in his gaze. "That darkness is not evil. It is simply another way of being. And sometimes, Larian, the dark is where you learn the most important truths." The words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She wanted to ask more, to understand what he meant, but exhaustion from the long ceremony caught up with her. Marcus seemed to sense this without telepathy, without any of the tools her people relied upon. "Rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow I will show you something that may help you understand. There is a place humans keep, a memorial to our past. If you wish to know why the Watchers fear us, that is where the answer begins." Larian nodded slowly. As she moved toward the sleeping chamber, she glanced back at Marcus. He had returned to watching the stars, his silhouette framed against the cosmos. For the first time since agreeing to this marriage, Larian felt something other than diplomatic duty. She felt curiosity mixed with a strange sense of anticipation. Whatever secrets humans carried in their silent dark, she would learn them, and perhaps in understanding her new husband's people, she would understand why even gods could feel fear, the awakening truth. The memorial station hung in the emptiness between stars, a structure built from dark metal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Larian felt uncomfortable as their shuttle approached. Valkara architecture celebrated illumination and openness, but this human monument seemed designed to embrace shadow. Marcus sat beside her in silence, his expression distant as he watched their destination grow larger. "This is the Archive of Endurance," Marcus explained as they docked. "Every human child visits here as part of their education. It teaches us where we come from and what we survived to reach the stars." Inside, the station was dimly lit with soft blue lights that reminded Larian of bioluminescent deep-sea creatures. The walls were lined with data crystals, similar to Valkara technology but darker in color. Human attendants moved quietly through the corridors, maintaining the archives with reverent care. Marcus led Larian to a circular chamber at the station's heart. In the center stood a holographic projector, and around the walls hung images of Earth through different ages. Larian recognized the blue-green planet from diplomatic files, but these pictures showed it changed, scarred by events she did not understand. "Humans are young compared to the Valkara," Marcus began, activating the projector. "When your people were building your first stellar empire, we were still confined to our homeworld. We knew nothing of the greater universe. We were alone." The hologram shifted, showing Earth's solar system. Then, without warning, something dark appeared at the edge of the display. It moved wrong, defying the natural motion of celestial bodies. Larian felt her breath catch as the thing approached Earth. 73,000 years ago, something found us. Marcus continued, his voice steady but quiet. We call it the first visitor. Your people's records do not mention it, because the Watchers erased all evidence of its passage through civilized space. But Earth was beyond their protection, in the region you call dead space. The hologram showed the entity descending toward Earth. It was not a ship or a creature, but something else entirely. A piece of living void that corrupted reality wherever it touched. Lyrian watched in horror as the projection showed human cities consumed by darkness, millions dying as the entity fed on their world. How did you survive? Lyrian whispered. Marcus's expression grew distant. We learned. The entity could not be fought with weapons or technology. It existed partially outside normal space. But humans possessed something unexpected. Our consciousness, shaped by isolation and evolution in dead space, could perceive the entity differently. A handful of gifted humans made contact with it not to fight but to understand. The hologram shifted again, showing figures standing before the darkness. They were not consumed. Instead, something impossible happened. The entity paused as if confused or curious. The humans began to communicate with it, not through language or telepathy, but through something else. Lyrian could not comprehend the method, but she saw the result. The entity withdrew, leaving Earth damaged but alive. The first visitor left, but it changed us, Marcus said. It taught us that consciousness is more flexible than anyone believed. That even beings of pure void could be reasoned with if you understood their nature. After that encounter, humans were different. Our minds developed in ways that let us exist in the silent dark, as your people call it. We could think in spaces where normal consciousness failed. Lyrian struggled to process this information. The Watchers know about this? They do. They witnessed what happened from a distance. It terrified them because it proved something they had never wanted to acknowledge, that their understanding of the universe was incomplete. That consciousness could exist and even thrive in conditions they considered impossible. Marcus led her deeper into the archive, where older records were stored. He showed her documentation of humanity's expansion into space, but it was not the triumphant story Lyrian expected. Instead, she saw repeated encounters with entities that existed beyond normal understanding. Each time, humans survived not through superior technology or divine intervention, but through their unique ability to adapt and comprehend the incomprehensible. During the War of the Burning Void, Marcus said, opening a heavily encrypted file, humans encountered something even the Watchers fled from, a breach in reality itself, where the laws of physics collapsed and nightmares became real. The Valkyra were not involved in that conflict because your territory was far from the affected region, but several other advanced civilizations were destroyed. The hologram showed fleets of ships being torn apart by impossible geometries. Lyrian recognized some of the vessels from historical records. The Krell Dominion, the Synthesis Collective, even early Valkyra exploration craft, all consumed by churning chaos that defied every natural law. The Watchers declared the region forbidden and withdrew. Marcus continued. They advised all civilizations to avoid it, to let the breach burn itself out over millennia. But human colonies existed in that sector. Millions of our people were trapped with no hope of evacuation, so we did what we have always done. We walked into the darkness to bring them home. Lyrian felt something twist in her chest as she watched the record. Human ships, small and insignificant compared to the massive vessels of other species, entered the breach. They should have been destroyed instantly. Instead, they moved through the chaos as if navigating a storm rather than impossible physics. We learned the breach was not random, Marcus explained. It was an ecosystem, a form of life that existed in dimensions we barely understood. Our scientists discovered that human consciousness could interact with it because we were already partially adapted to existing in liminal spaces. We did not fight the breach. We mapped it, studied it, and eventually found a way to communicate with the entities living within it. The hologram showed the impossible. Humans establishing research stations inside the breach. Human scientists working alongside creatures made of folded space and recursive time. Slowly, over decades, they learned to negotiate with the breach itself. They convinced it to contract, to fold back into the hidden dimensions where it naturally belonged. When the Watchers returned centuries later and found the breach sealed, they were astonished, Marcus said. They investigated and discovered what we had done. That was when their fear truly began. Because we had not just survived the impossible, we had befriended it. Lyrian sat down on a nearby bench, her legs suddenly weak. Everything she had been taught about the nature of the universe felt unstable. The Valkara prided themselves on their telepathic abilities and their connection to the Watcher's wisdom. But here was evidence that humans operated on an entirely different level, one that made even the godlike Watchers uncomfortable. "Why did you not tell the galaxy about this?" Lyrian asked. "Your people could have demanded respect, used this knowledge as leverage." Marcus smiled sadly. "Because we understand something others do not. Power through fear leads to isolation. We did not want to be feared. We wanted to be understood. That is why I agreed to this marriage, Lyrian. Not to end a war through strength, but to build a bridge through trust." He sat beside her, close but not touching, respecting her space. "The Watchers fear us because we prove their understanding is limited. The Valkara are uncomfortable with us because we exist outside your telepathic network. But fear and discomfort are not permanent states. They can be overcome through patience and genuine connection." Lyrian looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. She had viewed their marriage as a political necessity, a sacrifice for peace. But Marcus had approached it as an opportunity, a chance to show the galaxy that humans were not mysterious threats but simply a different kind of consciousness trying to find its place in the universe. "You walked into the darkness and came back changed," Lyrian said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. "You learned that what others call impossible is simply unexplored. That is why the Watchers fear you, not because you are dangerous, but because you prove they are not omniscient." Marcus nodded. "Every species develops based on their environment and experiences. The Valkara evolved with telepathy and divine guidance. You learned to exist in harmony with greater powers. Humans evolved in isolation. In regions where normal rules did not apply, we learned to question everything and find our own answers. Neither approach is superior. They are simply different paths to understanding." Before Lyrian could respond, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and a mechanical voice announced a priority alert. Marcus was on his feet instantly, his casual demeanor replaced by focused intensity. A human officer rushed into the chamber, breathless. "Commander Webb, we have a code nightmare situation. The Valkara homeworld is under attack. Something has broken free from the Watchers' containment fields. They are calling it the Skalrex." Lyrian felt her blood turn cold. The Skalrex was a legend from ancient Valkara history, a horror from before the Watchers had brought order to the galaxy. It was said to consume entire worlds, feeding on consciousness itself. The Watchers had imprisoned it eons ago in a pocket dimension, sealed away from all reality. Marcus turned to her, his ocean blue eyes steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "Lyrian, I need to know. Will your people accept our help?" She stared at him, mind racing. The Valkara military was powerful, their telepathic coordination unmatched in conventional warfare. But against something like the Skalrex, something that existed partially outside normal space, would traditional tactics work? Then she remembered everything she had just learned. Humans specialized in the impossible. They thrived where others failed. "Yes," Lyrian said firmly. "We will accept your help. But you must understand, even the Watchers could barely contain the Skalrex. What can humans possibly do against such a threat?" Marcus's expression grew serious, but beneath it, Lyrian thought she detected something else. Not fear or doubt, but determination mixed with an almost anticipatory readiness, as if he had been preparing for exactly this kind of crisis his entire life. "We will do what we have always done," Marcus said simply. "We will walk into the darkness and find the truth waiting there. When the darkness comes, the Valkara homeworld of Valoria, burned beneath an impossible sky." Lyrian stood on the bridge of the human vessel Prometheus, watching through the viewport as her beautiful world twisted under the Skalrex's influence. Cities that had stood for millennia melted like wax, their crystalline structures flowing into new, terrible shapes that hurt to perceive. The telepathic network of her people screamed with panic and pain, their unified consciousness fracturing under the entity's assault. Marcus stood beside her, silent but present. Behind them, the bridge crew of the Prometheus worked with focused efficiency. Unlike Valkara ships where telepathic coordination created seamless teamwork, the humans communicated verbally, through hand signals, and via their computer systems. It seemed crude to Lyrian, yet their coordination was flawless. "Status report," Marcus commanded quietly. Captain Rodriguez responded immediately. "The Skalrex has fully manifested around Valoria. It is not attacking in the traditional sense, sir. It is restructuring reality in a sphere approximately 50,000 kilometers in diameter. The Valkyra fleet cannot approach without losing cohesion. Their telepathic network breaks down within 5,000 kilometers of the entity. And the Watchers? Marcus asked. They are maintaining a containment perimeter at a safe distance, Dr. Chen reported from her station. But they refuse to engage directly. I am reading their broadcasts now. She paused, her expression troubled. They are calling the Skull Rex a contamination risk. They say that direct contact with it would compromise their essence. Lyrian felt anger surge through her. They imprisoned this thing. They swore to protect the galaxy from ancient threats. Now they abandon us when we need them most? Marcus turned to her, his expression gentle despite the crisis. The Watchers are not abandoning you out of cruelty, Lyrian. They are ancient beings of pure consciousness existing in perfect order and light. The Skull Rex is chaos incarnate. For them to fight it directly would be like asking fire to embrace ice. They would both cease to exist. Then what can be done? Lyrian demanded, her voice breaking. If even the Watchers cannot stop it, how can anyone? Marcus moved to the main display, bringing up a three-dimensional rendering of the Skull Rex. The entity appeared as a roiling mass of contradictions, existing simultaneously in multiple states that should have been impossible. It pulsed with colors that had no names, moved in directions that did not exist, and sang with frequencies that bypassed ears entirely to vibrate directly in the mind. The Skull Rex is not evil, Marcus said, studying the display. It is simply fundamentally different from normal reality. It exists in a state of constant transformation, feeding on fixed structures and ordered consciousness. To beings like the Watchers or the Valkyra who thrive on stability and unity, it is a natural predator. But not to humans? Lyrian asked, beginning to understand. Marcus shook his head. Humans evolved in dead space, remember? Our consciousness developed to handle instability, to find pattern in chaos, to adapt to conditions that should not support life. We are not immune to the Skull Rex, but we can perceive it differently. He turned to his crew. Prepare the liminal team. Tell them we are going in. Lyrian watched as 6 humans entered the bridge, each wearing minimal armor marked with symbols she did not recognize. They moved with calm purpose, showing no fear despite knowing they were about to face an entity that had terrorized the galaxy before recorded history. The team leader, a woman with gray-streaked hair and scars running across her face, approached Marcus. Commander Webb, the liminal team is ready for deployment. Thank you, Commander Amara, Marcus said. Brief the ambassador, please. Commander Amara turned to Lyrian. Ambassador, the liminal team specializes in operations within unstable reality zones. We have trained our entire lives to maintain consciousness in conditions where normal thought patterns collapse. Our job is not to fight the Skull Rex, but to understand it. Understand it? Lyrian repeated. That thing is destroying my world. Yes, Amara agreed calmly. Because it does not understand your world. The Skull Rex exists in a constant state of becoming. It cannot comprehend fixed structures or stable consciousness because those concepts are alien to its nature. When it encounters them, it tries to assimilate them into its own state of being. That appears as destruction to us, but to the Skull Rex it is simply exploration. Marcus added, Our plan is to enter the affected zone and establish communication with the entity. We will attempt to teach it that stable reality and chaotic existence can coexist without consuming each other. Lyrian stared at them in disbelief. You are going to reason with a force of nature? You are going to negotiate with chaos itself? We have done it before, Marcus said simply. During the War of the Burning Void, we learned that even the most incomprehensible entities operate according to some form of logic. It is just logic we have to learn to understand first. The Prometheus moved into position, approaching the boundary of the Skull Rex's influence. Lyrian felt the telepathic connection to her people growing weaker as they drew closer. The unified consciousness of the Valkyra fragmenting into individual voices, and finally, into silence. It was terrifying, like going blind and deaf simultaneously, but the humans seemed unaffected. They worked their stations normally, communicating through their crude verbal methods. For them, the isolation that paralyzed the Valkyra was simply another day of ordinary existence. We are crossing the boundary, Captain Rodriguez announced, reality distortion increasing, gravitational constants fluctuating, local physics becoming unreliable. Through the viewport, Lyrian watched as space itself began to twist. Stars stretched into impossible spirals. The darkness between them pulsed with colors that should not exist. And at the center of it all, the Skalrex writhed, a living storm of transformation that consumed everything it touched. The liminal team moved to the deployment bay. Marcus followed them, and Lyrian rushed after him. "You are going personally?" she asked, grabbing his arm. He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then met her eyes. There was warmth there, genuine care that surprised her. "This is what I do, Lyrian. This is what all humans learn to do. We walk into the impossible and find the possible waiting there. But what if you fail? What if this is truly beyond even human understanding?" Marcus smiled, and in that expression, Lyrian finally saw what made humans truly different. It was not fearlessness or superior ability. It was acceptance. Acceptance that failure was possible but could not be allowed to prevent action. Acceptance that some questions had no guaranteed answers but were worth asking anyway. Acceptance that darkness was not the absence of light but simply a different kind of existence. "If we fail," Marcus said gently, "then we fail trying. That is all any conscious being can do, try to understand and hope that understanding leads to something better." He moved to join his team, but Lyrian called out, "Marcus, wait." She struggled to find words for what she wanted to express. "I understand now. Why the Watchers fear you. Why they refuse to bless our union. You represent something they cannot control or predict. You prove that their perfect order is not the only way consciousness can exist." Marcus nodded slowly. "And perhaps after today they will learn that diversity of thought is not a threat. It is a strength." The liminal team entered their deployment craft, a small vessel designed to navigate unstable reality. Lyrian returned to the bridge, watching through the external cameras as the craft detached and flew directly into the heart of the Skalrex's influence. For a moment, nothing happened. The craft seemed to dissolve, breaking into fragments that scattered like light through a prism. Lyrian's heart clenched, certain she had just watched Marcus and his team die. But then the fragments reassembled, not as a solid ship but as a pattern, a structure of meaning that existed within the chaos. The liminal team had not been destroyed. They had adapted, transforming themselves into something that could exist within the Skalrex's reality while maintaining their consciousness and purpose. Through the external sensors, Lyrian heard them. Not words exactly, but concepts transmitted through a medium she could barely perceive. They were communicating with the Skalrex, showing it images and ideas. They demonstrated stable reality, showed how consciousness could exist in fixed patterns without losing the beauty of change. They explained that transformation did not require consumption, that growth could happen through addition rather than replacement. The Skalrex responded, its chaotic song shifting in tone. It was listening, learning, trying to understand these strange beings who could exist in both its world and the world of order simultaneously. Hours passed. The Prometheus maintained position at the boundary, monitoring the exchange. Lyrian watched in amazement as the distortion around Valoria slowly began to stabilize. The twisted cities were not restored, but they stopped melting. The terrified screams in the telepathic network quieted as Valkara citizens realized they were no longer being consumed. Finally, the Skalrex contracted, pulling itself back from the physical world. It did not disappear, but rather shifted, moving into a different state of existence that allowed it to observe without destroying. The liminal team's craft reformed into solid matter, and they returned to the Prometheus. Marcus entered the bridge looking exhausted but satisfied. His hair was disheveled, and strange patterns flickered across his skin, fading slowly as he readjusted to normal reality. "It is done," he said simply. "The Skalrex understands now. It will not attack stable reality again, because it comprehends that both states can coexist. It has agreed to exist in the spaces between, where chaos and order meet." Lyrian approached him slowly. "How? How did you teach it something even the Watchers could not?" "Because the Watchers tried to imprison it to deny its nature," Marcus explained. "We acknowledged its right to exist and simply asked it to respect ours in return. Communication, not domination." Outside the ship, Lyrian saw something she never expected. The Watchers were returning, but their approach was different now. They did not radiate their usual confidence. Instead, they moved with what could only be described as caution, studying the humans with newfound respect. One Watcher manifested on the bridge, its form of pure light carefully constrained. When it spoke, all present heard its voice directly in their minds, even the humans who normally existed outside telepathic reach. "Humanity," the Watcher intoned, "you have accomplished what we believed impossible. You have reasoned with unreason itself. For this you have earned our acknowledgement. We withdraw our judgment. Humans shall be recognized as beings of equal standing in the cosmic order." Marcus inclined his head respectfully. "We do not seek superiority, only understanding. The universe is vast enough for many forms of consciousness to coexist." The Watcher turned its attention to Lyrian. "Ambassador of the Valkara, your union with this human is now blessed. May it serve as a bridge between our different ways of perceiving reality." With that, the Watcher faded, leaving behind a sense of change, of the universe adjusting to accommodate new truths. Lyrian looked at Marcus, this ordinary man who had just rewritten the rules of cosmic politics. "You never wanted power," she said softly. "You only wanted to be understood." Marcus smiled tiredly. "Power without understanding is just fear wearing a crown. We learned that lesson in the darkness when we were alone and had only ourselves to rely on. Every species has something to teach the universe. The Valkara bring unity of thought. The Watchers bring ancient wisdom, and humans. We bring the reminder that even in the darkest places, consciousness can thrive and find meaning." Lyrian stepped forward and, for the first time, embraced her husband. Not out of duty or diplomacy, but out of genuine respect and affection. She felt his arms wrap around her carefully, mindful of their physical differences. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving my world, for teaching me that darkness is not evil, only different, for showing me that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from understanding them." Marcus held her gently. "And thank you for trusting me, for being willing to learn, for keeping your mind open even when everything you believed was challenged." That is the real courage, Lyrian. Not facing external threats, but facing internal doubts and choosing growth over comfort. As the Prometheus began its journey back to Valoria, Lyrian looked out at the stars with new eyes. The universe suddenly seemed larger, more complex, filled with possibilities she had never imagined. And beside her stood a human, a being from the silent dark who had proven that even gods could learn to see differently. The war was over, not through conquest, but through understanding. And in that understanding, a new era began. One where different forms of consciousness could coexist, learn from each other, and together explore the infinite mysteries of existence. The darkness was no longer something to fear. It was simply another place where life, consciousness, and meaning could flourish, waiting for those brave enough to look beyond the light and discover what truths lay hidden in the shadows.